Okay, so what we're going to do in this lab is that we're going to set up our Vyatta firewall, so to be able to communicate and to be able to firewall the ports. So the key focus is for us to set up Vyatta, and this is our public interface here. Then we have private, and then we have our DMZ here. Okay, so our target is to be able to allow communications to go this way, but not allow them to come back in unless they've been established from inside the network. Okay, so it's an important concept. If we initiate the connection from, say, the private network to a public network, the firewall will remember the connection so that the communications are allowed back. Any connection which comes in from the public network to the private won't be actually allowed. Then what we'll do is that we'll allow all communications from the private network into the DMZ, and again we'll have to open it up so that all established communications are allowed back in. But what we'll do is that we'll only allow port 80 and 443 to go from the DMZ into the private network. Okay, so that's the setup. We're going to be using 192.168, and then in this case we'll use 99 here, and we'll use 100 in this demonstration. So that's 99. So it's 192.168.99.7 for Ubuntu, 192.168.99.254 for the Ethernet 1 for that gateway. Okay, that's the gateway that uses. Ethernet 2 is going to be 192.168.100.254. Our Windows machine will sit on the DMZ, so that will be 192.168.100.7. And then here we'll use dhcp, and hopefully, if our NAT is working okay, then we'll be able to NAT out onto the network and connect to Google. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so you should be allocated an address space. I'll just use 99 here and 100 here. So the first thing we want to do is to be able to open up our vSphere, and I just log in. Okay, so initially what I'll do is I'll reset all the virtual machines just to make sure they're all set to a fresh instance. Okay, so we've taken snapshots of each of the virtual machines. It's a good idea when you create your virtual machines to be able to set up a snapshot initially, just in case you do something wrong. You can go back to it quite easily. So I'm going to take this group number here, and what I'll do is I'll just power them all off, because you need to power them off before you can get the snapshot back. So I just power them all off, power this one off. This is our Windows one, power it off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back just to make sure that we're starting from a fresh instance. So I'm going to go back to the snapshot, and it should be clean. There shouldn't be any IP addresses set or and so on. Do the same with Vyatta. Go back to the snapshot that we took, and same again for Windows. Snapshot manager. There we go. Okay, so that's us all fresh there. And what we'll do is we'll just start them all up, just power them up. It should just take a little minute. Power this one on, and we'll power this one on. Okay, so I'm running this from home, so there'll be a little bit of a delay, but you can see it's pretty good. Right, okay, so let's open up our consoles. So there's Ubuntu, and there is Vyatta, and there's Windows. And then just let me close this down. So I'll just log on, then we can get started. Right, there we go. And Vyatta. I might have typed that wrong. There we go. Okay, this is in. Right. So I've pre-prepared the configs. Often what you do is you have all the rules actually already set up and you just edit them. Okay, so this shows the configuration of the IP addresses and the default gateway for Vyatta. This will set up our NAT from the private network, and then use the Ethernet 0 for the external network. This sets NAT up for the DMZ, and that will basically set us up. Okay, so we should all be roughly connected from there. Then what we do is that we'll set up some basic firewall rules. Okay, so this is our setting up private, public and DMZ, and then applying those onto Ethernet 0 for public, Ethernet 1 for private and Ethernet 2 for DMZ. Now what we do is we set up the rules. So in this case, for the DMZ to private traffic, anything that's been accepted we will allow back in, and anything related to that port will be allowed back into. And then what we'll do is that, so that won't allow any connections to happen between the DMZ and private. So what I've got to do is to enable our ports for 8.443. So this rule will enable 8.443. So no other connections will be allowed to be initiated from the DMZ to the private apart from TCP 8.243. From the private to DMZ, let's just accept all the connections, and then from then we'll apply these. So this takes from the DMZ to private. We want this rule applied. So this rule from the DMZ to the private, that's what is initiated. And then from private to the DMZ, we want this rule set, which is this one, which will accept all. So after we apply these, what we'll actually see is that we should allow connections from private to DMZ, all ports, but from the DMZ into the private, then we should only have 8.443. And what you'll find is that there'll be no connection from the private to the public network, so we need to set up that rule. So that's from private to public, and then we'll accept all. Then we'll apply that from private to public, and then what we'll do is we've got to allow our rules to come back. So in this case, this is from private to public. Anything that's been established, we will allow back in. Okay, because by applying this one, we'll come back to it. By applying this one here, the connection will go out, but it won't actually come back again. So we need to apply this one. So what we'll do is we'll enable these in little blocks, and we'll actually see how the whole thing runs. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get it all set up with no firewalling and make sure that we can connect to Google and everything like that. Okay, so it's a bit of a pain to actually go ahead and type in all the commands. So often what we do is that when we enable just one of the ports, so what we'll do is we'll enable the private network, and so I'm just going to enable one port here, and that's Ethernet 1, and then what we'll do is we'll configure everything through telnet on from our Ubuntu device. Sorry, my Mac's playing up with the 2 key. 24. Okay, we'll just check that. Okay, that's setting up our default gateway. And 192.168.99. Let's have a look at our interfaces. Okay, and that should be okay. So let's go back in and set interfaces Ethernet ETH1. Sorry, I forgot to put address. Address 192.168.99.254. My 2 key isn't playing up. It's playing up 254. And there we go. So what we'll do is we'll now go ahead and we'll enable telnet on the Vyatta firewall, and we'll go ahead and commit that. Okay, so all that we've done here is enable the Ethernet 1 port for the connection to the firewall from Linux, and then we've enabled the telnet service. So over here, this is our Linux machine. Okay, so we'll just get logged in. So what we'll do is that we'll just set up our interface here. Okay, so we're going to set up ifconfig, and if we have a little look here, this is the command that we use, ifconfig ethernet, and then the IP address, netmask, and so on. So you would normally do this command and have a look to see we have Ethernet 8, Ethernet 11. So we'll set up 192.168, and remember we're on 99.7 netmask of 255.255.255.0 and up. Okay, so that's our interface up. So the next command that we have is to set the default gateway. Okay, so there we go. So sudo root add default gateway. Uh, 192.168 99.254. That's fine. So the one thing that we need to set is the name service IP address. We'll do that in here. So name server 10.200.0.1. Okay, so Control X. Yes, there we go. So the first thing we do is we just ping ourself 10.99.7. Perfect. 254. Perfect. Okay, so here's where the magic comes in. So what we'll do is we'll make a telnet connection to the firewall 168.254, and we just log in. Okay, so that's as in Vyatta. It's up to yourself if you want to just do the configure here and there. So what we'll do is we'll take the config up to here. We're happy with that. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll paste that in. And it just batters through the commands. Then we'll just commit that. Okay, so what we should find is that our firewall should have actually changed its state. So now what we'll do is we'll go to our Windows instance, which is on the 100 network, and we'll just log in here, and hopefully everything will be working. Okay, so just log in. So how quick is that? So we've got to go to our network connections. There we go. So this is on the tab. So it's 192.168.100.7, and then our default gateway is 192.168.100.254. Remember, it's the port on the router that we connect to. In this case, our name server is at that address, and that's basically it for the config. Okay, so no firewalls applied or anything like that. So what we obviously do is we just go through and do our normal testing to make sure that everything is working okay. That's us. That's the default gateway. That is the other side. Perfect. Okay, and then that's the Linux machine. Okay, so we're getting connectivity through the firewall. Next thing we'll do is we'll just connect to see if we can connect to the services. Okay, so the Linux machine is on 192.168.99.7. Perfect. Okay, so Linux machine is working. We can do an nmap onto the other network just to have a little look. 192.168.99.0/24. It's going to quickly see which ports are open on the firewall and then which ports we can see on the other server. In fact, just to save time, what we'll do is we'll just map one machine. There we go. Okay, so we can see that on our Linux server we've got FTP, SSH, Telnet, HTTP and VNC. If you wanted, you could do the same thing on the firewall. You should find that Telnet is open. Okay, so that's the way that we can actually probe. So everything looks to be fine here. We've got connectivity, and we'll just make sure that we have connectivity on this side. Okay, so we'll just ping. Let's just go and ping the Windows machine, and that's perfect. And then we'll run the web server. We'll contact the web server on the Windows machine just to see if that's working okay. Okay, so you can see we have no firewalling at all. Everything's really set up, and 192.168. 168.100.7, and there we go. So that's the IIS server on the other side, so everything's fine there. So again, what we'll do is we'll run nmap against that machine just to see what services it's running. 192.168.1.7, and there we go. So the Windows Server is running a whole lot of services. We can have a look with netstat-a on each side just to see if these services tie up. Okay, so everything's working well. We can ping the default gateway 10.200.0.1. Perfect. And we can ping 8.8.8.8 to see if we have internet connectivity, and we do. Excellent. So we should be able to get the internet here, and that's fantastic. So let's see if we can get internet connectivity here. If we can, then everything's all right up and running. Okay, so that's the advantage of having this predefined script. You know that it's going to work and it's all going to be set up. So there we go. Okay, so we have complete connectivity across the firewall, and these were the configs that we had. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to firewall, and what we'll do is that we'll do the first part of the firewall. We'll actually apply it, and so these lines here will set up the port 80 and port 443 allowed through from the DMZ to the private, and it will allow any connection which was established to go through from another network, and then from private to DMZ we'll accept everything. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go back to my Ubuntu machine here, and then I'm basically just going to paste that in, and that's it. Okay, so that's now our firewalling. So we shouldn't really see much difference here. I'll come back to Google in a little minute. So what we should see here is that we still should have connectivity, because remember we've enabled port 80. Okay, so the Linux machine is working fine. We're getting connectivity here, but remember we had connectivity over here, and hopefully, fingers crossed, so we have allowed that to go through, so that works. But now let's have a look at our nmap, and what we got before was FTP, SSH, Telnet, HTTP, and VNC. SSH, Telnet. It's because we're using the SYN scan. Okay, the SYNs are allowed to go through, and we'll try a connect scan. Okay, so there's our FTP and so on. So what we'll do is that we'll try and connect to, just let me see where we are. Just let me check. Okay, what I've forgotten to do is to commit. Right, okay, so no firewall has been applied. Now the firewall has been applied. Okay, so sorry about that. Right, okay, so let's try it again. Okay, so our connectivity looks to be fine. Okay, so we're getting connectivity here. So let's try from Windows. Okay, so that's working okay. So now let's do a scan. It's taken a bit longer to do that because it's struggling to get a reply back from the firewall. Okay, so that's absolutely perfect. We can see HTTP and HTTPS are the only ports where before we got all these other ports. Now what's happening is that those ports are now being blocked. Okay, so we should still be able to get access to our FTP, our HTTP service, but if we were to run, say, try and connect to the FTP server, which is open, is running, then you'll find that we don't get any connectivity. Okay, so what we should find now is that we can actually get access to the other side. So there we go. So it takes about 30 seconds to settle down, so don't worry if it doesn't go through straight away. So we should find that everything is fine here when we do our nmap. Because now what's happening is that we're allowed, all the connections are allowed to go through from Linux out and then allowed back again from there. There we go. Okay, so you can actually see that we're blocking from the DMZ to the private network, but we can't go. But the other way, from Linux, from the private to the DMZ, we're allowing everything. One thing you should be able to see is that we don't have any Google connectivity, and the reason for that is that we've now applied our firewall, and we haven't allowed a connection between the private network and the public network. Same again over here, we shouldn't get any connectivity to Google. So then the next thing we'll do is that we'll actually provide that connectivity. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. So this says from the private network to the public network, accept. So that's going to allow everything out to the public network, and then we're going to apply it. Then, although we're allowing the connections out, we've got to remember them and allow them back in. So this one will accept any established connections or connections related to it and allow it back in. So we won't be able to connect into the private network from the public network, but we will be able to initiate from the private network to the public network. Okay, so we'll take that and then we shall apply that. Okay, so remember, no Google, the Google's not working, and the reason for that is that we're not getting any connections out. So we'll just paste that in. Okay, so I'll just show you no Google there. Okay, thank you. And then the mistake we made the last time is that we'll just commit that, and fingers crossed, magic, isn't that great? Okay, so that showed you a very basic overview of how we can actually set up our firewall, set up all the rules and so on. So we can go ahead and do the same thing over here to allow the DMZ to actually be able to communicate with the public network and so on. Just do the same kind of thing, and then that will allow us to be able to get the whole thing up and